Produced by Victoire. Victoire gives a special thanks to the EWF, Empire Wrestling Federation, and Mr. Jesse Hernandez, as well as SoCal Wrestling TV. Find the app on Roku.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Power and Glory, the podcast. You want to discover the power of truth? Then you have come to the right place. Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, my name is Amir. I'm usually joined by my co-host, Paul Roma. However, Paul, remember that documentary we were telling you about, the Vince McMahon documentary? Paul and Mario Mancini are actually shooting that as we speak today. So that is why they're not here. But nonetheless, the show must go on, and it will go on with my special guest. He's a returning guest on Victoire because he's just that damn good. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, pretty Peter Avalon.
Thank you for having me. It's a beautiful afternoon here in sunny Southern California. I am relaxing, enjoying my days off. I'm unkempt. I'm having a cocktail.
Wow.
I'm happy to be here.
Wow, there you go. I've got my coffee here, so not quite as strong as you, my friend, but nonetheless, we got some beverages here. And also, viewers, make sure you powerplex that subscribe button, hit the likes, and share with your friends and family. We greatly appreciate it. So Paul and I are going to be talking to, Peter and I today are going to be
Peter and Paul. It's okay.
Peter and Paul. Remember I said
I'm missing Paul, man. It was pretty, and now it's just one pretty, you know?
You know, well, at least you get to steal the show this time, Peter.
Man, I always steal the show.
There you go. That's right, the Peter. And for those of you, so Peter, you're pushing the whole pretty Peter Avalon, right? That's the whole.
How can I not push it? I'm pretty. I'm gorgeous. I'm beautiful.
That is true.
I'm pretty because I'm just real. I just am. I exist.
Yeah.
I just emanate pretty, you know?
It's true. Not just pretty though, Peter. Also production, which is going to be the topic of our discussion today, because fans have written in. They're always asking questions. How much do wrestlers make? What does the budget look like? How do you run a show? And all this good stuff. So I thought, let you and I, considering we grew up in the golden era of pro wrestling, when merchandise, sorry, youngsters, was friggin' merchandise. I mean, I'm talking the Wrestling Buddies. I'm talking WrestleMania, the arcade game on the Super Nintendo, all that good stuff. So, but to get to where we're going to get, Peter, let's start talking about merchandise. So when you grew up, what was some of your favorite merch? Was it the action figures, the buddies? What was around when you were growing up?
I liked the action figures. I had a lot of the action figures, a bunch of different lines. I remember like the weird faces and some of the big rubber arms. I remember I had this awful looking Ken Shamrock, but it was awesome because it was Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
I had the video games. I had the OG SmackDown on PlayStation. And then SmackDown 2 and I think SmackDown 3.
Yeah.
And then also I had No Mercy on the Nintendo 64. I had rented multiple times WrestleMania 2000.
Yeah.
And then also the WCW games that were before that too. Those were fun. I think I don't know if it was Backstage Assault. I forgot is it NWO versus the World?
Was there a Mayhem in there? I think WCW.
Maybe, man. I had a lot of fun with those wrestling games.
Yeah.
And I tried all the other ones too. Warzone, Attitude, you name it.
Were you into the magazines at the time?
I had the magazines. Yeah, I remember the Raw magazine and all that. I had some of the pull-out posters of the Divas. I had hung them on my wall, So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, gosh.
Yeah.
Merchandise, again, so many things that have disappeared though now, Peter, because we had the DVDs. Before that, we had the VHSs. We had the ice cream bars. Remember do you remember the ice cream bars, the WWF ones?
I do. I never had them though.
Yeah. They were classic. They even had cereal boxes with wrestling's own friggin' cereal. It was incredible, an incredible boom of marketing genius at the time. But to compare and contrast though today, Peter, well, you're part of the AEW roster, so you see what kind of merchandise is out there today. Tell us, what do you think is the reason why we're not seeing as much of that that larger than life pop sort of like pop culture characters that we saw in the 90s there. The merchandise now is a little bit darker, a little bit edgier. What do you reckon the reason behind that is?
I think it's just maybe the progression of the times. Like you said, that we used to have DVDs and VHSs. Now there's just really not much physical media. When I think Best Buy and Target, a lot of them have stopped carrying a lot of physical media.
Yeah.
So there's that option is just not there.
Hmm.
But a lot of the stuff is just modernized. Like the toys are still there. I was walking through Target the other day.
Hmm.
I know you mentioned AEW, but the WWE toys, they had Rey Mysterio and a big Eddie Guerrero influenced lowrider toy, and then they had Undertaker on a big motorcycle that you could buy, and I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That seems very retro.
Yeah.
Um, but then it's still a lot of the standard action figures, which all look cool and they have different lines.
Hmm.
The AEW toys are very well made and
Yeah.
awesome. I have a lot of them
Yeah.
myself. So I think I don't know if it's changed too much. I think they've just eliminated a lot, but they really push the stuff that for sure sells, like
Yeah. Yeah.
the dolls.
A lot more realism though today in the
Yeah,
character. Like if you remember the old, did you ever and have any of the Hasbro figures?
with those the big chunky ones,
No, they were the little
little
ones,
ones.
probably about 4 or 5 inches. They were the early 90s. So when Hogan, Warrior, Savage, they had multiple versions of them. So I think there were like three Ted DiBiase's. Like,
That's cool.
yeah, so they had, but they were this tall. I mean, gosh, I mean, they're worth a small little fortune now, some of them, especially the Dusty Rhodes figure.
I
He,
wish they made more variety because that's what I've noticed. They kind of lack the variety
mm,
of the earlier toys. They're just kind of now just like the standard. Here's the doll, and then here's everybody else that's more realistic doll. They don't have the big, giant, oversized muscle ones anymore. The little ones, like you were saying. So I think for sure the variety is lacking. I do miss that.
yeah. But are in your interpretation, do you think that people are buying as much merch as the early 90s, mid 90s? The kids, do you think they're buying a lot more? What do you see out there?
I think it's mostly the apparel.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to be mostly the shirts because I mean, you read the reports on which shirts are selling, and then it works in trends. You'll have that hot item for a while, and then move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm. So a lot more, like I said, on apparel, less on the little gadgets and gizmos that we were able to buy in the past.
That's what it seems, and it just seems like maybe less are available
Mm-hmm. Oh
of
yeah,
those.
yeah, for sure. I'll tell you a little story, and viewers. So I remember there was this store in the UK, and every time I'd come back from high school, I'd sneak in there because I just want. I mean, it was amazing, Peter.
Hmm.
A whole wall of all the WWF action. I mean, talking the smoking guns, the whatever were up there, Crush, Papa Shango, tons of stuff. Well, but it was all for me back then. It was very colorful. It was very charming. It
Yeah,
definitely roped in the youngsters. When I see now, to your point, the AEW action figures, wonderfully designed. I think I went out and I got some of the first series when they first dropped the original
yeah,
King Omega and all that. Beautiful boxes, beautiful, but again, they're not. If I were to look at them, I'd say that would appeal more to a collector who is a young adult rather
hmm
than a 7-year-old child.
hmm
I don't see so, but again, you're there. You're in AEW. You go to ROH. How many little kids are left in those audiences these days?
There are a lot of little kids.
Hmm?
There are a lot of little kids.
A lot of
Tons of
them.
them. Tons of them. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think it's also it's in that point where you have a lot of the kids are being brought by their wrestling fan parents,
Mhm.
older brother, older sibling. You know what I mean? So I think they're just kind of introducing them that way. And then the kid, if the parents are into it, the kids are probably going to be into it too at that point.
Yeah. I wonder if it's because if you look at the evolution, like I said, the little kids in the 90s, late 90s, it seems like all the merchandise has evolved to suit that aging demographic. Whereas
Oh, for sure.
the guys now that are 35, 40, they were the ones who were being targeted with those original Hasbro figures. So
Yeah.
now everything's being designed to capture their eye, like you said, then they bring their kids. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily that the kids are the ones who are fueling the desire to go there. It's the
Yeah.
parents
Exactly.
dragging them along.
Introduce them to them.
Yeah.
It's not very organic of them to. They're not finding it themselves.
Mm. No,
Yeah,
not finding themselves. But the magazines were a huge way to sell merchandise back in the.
yeah.
We know Pro Wrestling Illustrated is still available to this day,
Is it
but
in print still? Because I
yes,
haven't I haven't found it in print in a long time.
yeah, it's here. It's here. I
Hmm.
saw it in Barnes and Noble the other week.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I just grabbed it. I looked at it, and it's funny because Peter, I haven't really looked at a wrestling magazine since like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I open it now and I'm looking through it. I'm like, what the heck is it? I mean, I don't know half the guys on in there at this point because there are a lot more wrestlers today than there were back then.
But that's still that was the fun of the original magazine.
Hmm.
Was reading through this stuff. What caught your eye was the familiar guy on the cover, and then you're discovering all these other ones in there that. So
Yeah.
I think it's the same feeling that you're having now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a different, I guess it's through the eyes of an adult rather than eyes of a younger man.
Yeah.
But definitely I don't see those sectionals anymore, the way they had all the merchandise, like the original WWF magazine. You had the bandanas, the bed sheets, the t-shirts, the big fingers, the big pointers.
Yeah.
You had so much variety, and it was right there, the mail order in the magazine.
Do
So
they
now,
still have all that stuff? I'm sure, like I know, like the WWE shop, they have different weird stuff.
yeah,
I think the AEW shop has a lot of weird stuff too. I think like little weird necklaces and stuff. But I think that stuff, I guess, is more targeted on their actual online stores. I haven't seen any of it in anywhere.
no, I don't think there's a lot of it out in stores. Like you said, it's mainly apparel now. It's
Yeah,
bygone of those days when you'd walk into a toy store and there'd be belts, t-shirts, action figure, the whole shebang was there. But having said that, Peter, if we go back in time now and we look at what brought everything to where it is today, that marketing push in the early 90s really is what catapulted wrestling to where it is today. There's no question. Without that type of marketing, there's no way it would have been known as much as it is today.
mhm.
So maybe, excuse me, maybe on some level, there's a little slowdown on the merchandise because there's really not that much need anymore to push that much. What do you think of that? Excuse me.
I think they're just going about it a different way. Now, it is a lot more targeted. It's not just the big bright colors, like because I mean the stuff in the '90s are doing it. They were just doing what they were doing with like the Ninja Turtle toys and Transformer toys, and it's just toys attached to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I still see that there, but I don't. I guess it's just not as much
Hmm.
now. You know,
Hmm.
I think it also goes back to just less stuff. There's no Hulk Hogan weight set or anything like that. They don't really take super risks like that. Maybe because the reward
Hmm.
is just not there. I don't know.
Well, there's definitely be a change. You mentioned risk there, and
Yeah.
we can cite Hollywood with that too.
Hmm.
Because nowadays you see a lot of remakes, a lot of rebooting, less chance on some original work. We look
Yeah.
at the 80s and 90s films comparatively to today. I mean, wow, smorgasbord to choose from in the 80s. But everything was marketed. I was watching a documentary on the Last Starfighter. Did you ever
Hmm.
see that movie?
No.
Go and check that one out. Last Starfighter. It was like in the realm of a Back to the Future,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
the Explorers, things like that. So there was this huge wave of creativity back then, which I
Yeah.
think pro wrestling was swept up in. It
For
was
sure.
blanketed in that. But now, like I said, I just see so if the business is not really dependent too much on the merchandise sales now, you having been a producer, Mr. Peter Avalon, where is the wrestling business? Where else are they generating their funds from now? If the marketing, if the merchandise is not the thing like it was back then, where's the money coming from now? Especially within AEW because they don't have the live house show.
I think the merch it is still the thing. It is still one of the things. It's always going to be one of the things. I think there's it's just different now the way they're making money. I think they still make just as much money. It's just now more niche. It isn't that mass thing like you're saying. But that's how a lot of stuff
Mhm.
is now. There's not a lot of stuff that is like the mass is watching together. What's the maybe the last thing that's like that? Maybe the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, where everybody is tuning into the same or the presidential races, maybe tuning into the same one thing. So everybody kind of has a mind, similar thing that they are thinking of because they've all seen it together.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's a lot separate. Like uh, I could be completely focused on watching this one thing over here on Netflix, and you're focused on this one thing on Hulu. We have no crossover, you know. So
Yeah.
people can kind of focus that niche, and I think wrestling falls into that niche. But they make a lot of their own niche, but they make a lot of money from those people that are fans of that, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
And so that they can just kind of target it, and then they don't have to take those risks. So they don't really have to try to appeal to anything else. It's just like, well, this is what our giant mass of money having fans like. Let's just keep making more of that
Yeah.
because they know it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
And the comparison I think is right with like Hollywood and everything. Everything is stuff that they know is going to make money. That's why they'll knock out 25 Marvel movies instead of taking a risk on this one weird psychological thriller thing, like
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
why why try to make money there when I know I'm going to make this over here?
Right. So basically, it's just an evolution of the media. You're able to dial it in better. So, like you said before, it was a very good analogy. You have to kind of blanket the world back in the
Yeah.
90s because we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Netflix.
People consume media completely different now than they did then. And it
Yeah.
just it just happens so quick, you
Mhm.
know?
I think that's why we're having this conversation, Peter, to get to the
Yeah.
bottom of this. It's like it's a confusion because it's like, okay, well, this is what brought us to the dance. Why is this not occurring anymore? Um, One of the other things you brought up was the muscle bound guys and all of this other stuff, these marketable characters. Now, of course, that's changed in wrestling too. Although I will say that as of late, I'm seeing some of those characters come back in now. Like I see the way Drew McIntyre and CM Punk and they're starting to create some of that larger than life feel again to certain
Mhm.
guys to really package them with a gimmick sort of thing. Um, do you think if we went back to that style of wrestling, that merchandise sales would increase or pretty much stay the same? If you had more of like the warlord, the Skinner, the big boss man, that kind of characters.
Mm, I think I don't know if you have to go maybe that on the nose like that. I think it's still colorful enough wrestling as it is. If you were to buy the different groups of different characters they have now, the
Mm,
toy there's a lot of similar toys, but then there's a lot that are completely different. Like AEW made the Darby Allin toys. Uh, those are big time collectibles, and that's an AEW example of a very unique looking individual that
yeah.
people get behind. A lot of kids like him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Mm.
Um, and then WWE is also they're great at doing that stuff. Yeah, you get CM Punk, who's like this colored man. He's got all these that came off wrong. So he's got all these colorful. He's a very colorful
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
with all those tattoos and stuff. So it's like he's a sight to see.
Yeah.
He looks cool. And
Yeah.
then same thing with the different ones. It's just I think we're still there. It's just done differently.
Yeah. Just
It's
done.
not just like here is a mantar or
Right.
something that's like silly over the top. When they go over the top now with wrestling, a lot of the time it still lives in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, yeah. I think you've had to do that since kayfabe was broken in the late '90s. After
Mhm.
wrestling with shadows with Bret Hart, the Montreal Screwjob. I think that's what really kicked it into high gear. And at that point, I think you could suspend belief to some degree. I mean, WWE
Mhm.
are doing it with the Wyatt Six. AEW did it with what was it, the House of Black.
I love it when they do that in wrestling. I love it when it's complete bullshit. I love it. I loved Undertaker being magic. I loved Kane being able to control Hellfire. I love that silliness in wrestling. I love that level of fantasy. I do. I love it 100%.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. It has its place in wrestling because it's fun. Wrestling is stupid at
Mhm.
the end of the day. It's so silly. And I mean that I know it sounds so shit, but I mean that in the the best positive way, because that's why I fell in love with it. It's so stupid. Most stuff I like, I feel is very it's a level of stupid,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's done well.
yeah,
It's fun. It's fun.
yeah,
It's campy,
yeah.
and it's fun.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
Just to go off topic here a little bit, but I just happened to watch the Heels TV series on Netflix.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Have you seen it, Peter?
I haven't had a chance to watch it, but it's on my to watch list.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show. What is his name? Amel, the guy who played the Arrow. I forget
Hmm.
his first name, but anyway, he's in it, and it's just this wonderful representation of a small company. His dad owned a small company, he inherited it, and they're trying to make shows on a weekly basis for their local town in Georgia.
Yeah.
But just the way that they depict him as a character, I'm sure
Right.
you'll see a lot of yourself in.
Hmm.
I was watching it with my wife, and she's laughing and she's pointing at me. She goes, "Yeah, that's you." Right? Because he's like always in trouble with his wife because he's always thinking about it, always
I
creating.
was thinking about wrestling. You're living in the fantasy to create the reality.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Now, for you though, because you've been in production, Peter.
Hmm.
So you understand a little bit more than perhaps a lot of wrestlers. Because a lot of wrestlers are merely talent that go out there, but you've been a writer, so you were in the booking committee and things like that. So you would have seen behind the scenes. Now, if you were hypothetically creating a company today in this market, would you try and, strap a rocket to the merchandise, or what aspects would you focus on first to build that audience?
Oh, I'm starting from scratch, or do I already have an
If
audience?
you're starting from scratch, how much emphasis would you put on merchandise, or when would you pull the trigger on that?
I think you could probably start right away. You know what I mean? It just depends on if you're maybe willing to lose money. Maybe you give some shirts away. For sure, develop some kind of logo, slap it on some stickers, some t-shirts, and maybe give it away during the show or before the show. Front row fans, they get a free shirt, something like that, just to kind of get it out there and get it going. And
Yeah.
then you could start selling stuff later when people see it and they want it, if you could still maintain running the show.
Right, right. Now, what about you though? Because I remember meeting you many years ago, ladies and gentlemen. Peter probably doesn't even remember this, but you were somewhere in Oceanside. I remember Nick Aldis was there. Nick Aldis was there. David Arquette was there for this
Oh.
particular. He was in the audience for this particular taping.
Mhm.
And I came out, this was prior to AEW. And I remember you had a merch table. And I remember walking up to you saying, that's a cool, because you had the big flashy robe with all the sequins on it at the time.
Mhm.
And I remember saying you got a great presentation. And, I love the robe and everything else. So you've had to market yourself. You've had to create merchandise. So tell us, how do you factor in creating merch for yourself? Like what is your creative process? Do you work alone? Do you work with somebody?
It's tough, man. You can get it could be tough. You can get a designer, um, and you got to just think of something unique, or you get someone to think of something for you. Uh, I've had my fair share of stuff sold, but there's for sure better people out there that can answer this question better than I can, that have had something take off far, far and wide.
Yeah.
Uh, but it could be a tough process if you don't have what you're looking for, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
phasing it in. Some
Yeah.
people have a better eye than others, or you're paying a designer and someone to design something for you,
Mhm.
which that's done a lot. Some people have just a better eye for something for you because they
Mhm.
know what you've presented, or
Mhm.
just some people are better at that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, at this point in your career, there, Peter, would you say that you'd enjoy doing? Let's just say again, hypothetically, if you were put in charge of the AEW marketing department tomorrow, do you think you'd flourish in that? Do you enjoy that now at this point, or you still would be focused more so on doing your wrestling now?
I think for sure be focused more on the wrestling
Okay.
side. Yeah. What they do is hard work. It's
Mhm.
very hard work, and that's not really been my world. Um, to dive into it, I think I could eventually learn the ropes and become an asset in that department.
Mhm.
Uh, for sure, 100%. But what they do is definitely tough.
Mhm.
Definitely tough.
So you've witnessed some of this firsthand then? Let's just say, let's pick a guy in AEW. Let's pick Darby Allin. Have you been around backstage when have you overheard and watched them kind of brand him and design things for him? Have you been around that? That's
A lot of stuff is closed doors. I've seen when they have presentation what they're doing, like they'll have the toys out for for them to sign. They have the collector's edition version of them for them to sign. They're taking pictures with it. They're giving uh, the toys away and in contests, things like that. So they're good at getting the merch out there, and they are trying their best to get more of it out there for sure. But it's also, there's going to come with speed bumps along the way. Certain toys sell better than other toys, so they're finding who their money makers are, and some of them surprise you.
So what you just said there, though, they do spend some time giving away freebies at the start to see if there's traction with a certain character, or am I wrong in that?
I think yeah, they'll just kind of pass out freebies, and then I think it's also just who's selling the most when they go to the actual merch stand, you
hmm
know?
hmm So do they have that in AEW? Do they have actually merch stands, much like an independent show when you go into a building? Do they have, there's Darby's section, there's Brian Cage or
Yeah,
whatever?
it's set up like, WWF's or WWE's. You have their spot you go to for all the merchandise, like a concert. You go to the one spot for all the merchandise. They have certain shirts hanging up.
Mhm.
Um, there isn't everything available is not going to be there. It's going to be who's hot and who's not. So whoever's hot, they're going to have a lot of that. Um, and then they'll send you to the website if you want something more specific.
Okay.
But
Now that
it works the same at both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of money being brought in, generated during those times. Uh,
Yeah, that's the way a lot of people make their money, man. Like I said with bands, that's how they a lot of the money is that stuff. It's those big merch, so they make it a big deal. So you got to have a lot of stuff to sell.
yeah. Now, how about someone like you? So going back to those days when I met you, so that would have been probably 2017, somewhere around there. I think it was
Hmm.
17, 18. I met you that time. You were not in AEW at that time, so you were still on the independents. Were you making a decent amount of money selling your merch at that time?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You leave with a few extra $100 in your pocket.
Okay. And you were
Yeah,
able to successfully duplicate that on every show pretty much?
I varied show to show. Sometimes fans are willing to spend money, and
Mhm.
sometimes are not. Depends on the show.
Mhm.
But most shows I would leave with hundreds of dollars in my pocket extra that you get from selling shirts. Um, Maybe we're not charging the concert prices.
Right.
We're not doing 35 $40 shirts,
Yeah.
doing 20 $25 shirts, but still the
Yeah.
profit's there.
Profits there. But today, are you still able to do that with your current AEW contract? Are you able to still merch, or did AEW? Because let's talk about licensing now, your
Mhm.
character. So obviously in the 90s, I remember as a kid, I was telling my wife the other day, I would look at the back of a box of an action figure and it would say copyright Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan are licensed trademarks to WWE, meaning for the layperson, WWE owns those characters. So that money is going to go into the coffers of the WWE and Vince, not directly to the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan. How is the structure different today, or is it the same with current guys on in like AEW, WWE?
The way they pay out, I think, is a little different, but I think it's just mostly the same. You make a cut of what they sell,
Okay.
and the company makes the most.
Okay. So if you, for example, again, Peter Avalon, now let's say you're not booked on AEW and you go and do a show somewhere else, but now you've got your Pretty Peter Avalon merchandise. Are you free to sell that on the independents and make the 100% profit? Or because you're still under contract, do you have to give a portion back to AEW?
A lot of it was going through Pro Wrestling Tees, so it's like you buy the shirts at a discount, and then
Hmm.
you can sell them, but they got
Okay.
to be the AEW shirts.
They have to be. So you have a term stipulation in your contract then. You can't just go off and make another original shirt.
Not supposed to,
Not
I don't think.
supposed. Not supposed. Okay. Well, Tony, if you're watching this, nah, he'll be fine. He's not gonna do anything. But so that's the way it's mostly set up then. So theoretically then, well, not theoretically, I suppose if you're on the global scene, even if you get a dividend of each T-shirt or each action figure, you're going to make a darn lot more than if you make 100% profit as an independent wrestler. However, though, a lot of people have made. I mean, the Young Bucks, didn't they? I mean, they were doing a lot of independent bookings, but didn't they basically make a lot of their money off merchandise?
A lot of wrestlers are making their money off of independent wrestling. Not every independent wrestler is, but it is how much you hustle. Like, look at Matt Cardona. I know
Hmm.
he came from the WWE. Hopefully, he saved some of his money from there. But he's making a lot of money on the indies. Yeah,
Hmm.
he's doing very well. He says he makes more on the indies than he was making at TV, and I believe him 100%. Before like guys like Danhausen before they were signed
Hmm.
with AEW and stuff, they were making their money on the indies. So
Hmm.
there's an absolute way to do it. You just have to hustle.
Yeah.
Depends on if you're over, if you're how many shows you're working,
Hmm.
the ease of access to your shirts. Like I want if I want to buy a Danhausen shirt, I could just go online to his store and buy one now. So
Hmm.
it's a shame, but he put that out there. It's how much you hustle.
Yeah.
So the Young Bucks were the kings of a lot of that stuff, of influencing and inspiring a lot of wrestlers to continue doing what they're doing because they were able to do it without the contract for so long. They were able to go and manage themselves in Japan and garner tons of independent success and
Hmm.
homeowners and they got all those shoes, brother. Those shoes
Yeah.
aren't cheap.
Yeah.
So the Bucks are kings of that, man, and they're still kings now, being signed to AEW and former tag champs. They're inspirational at what they were able to do
Hmm.
to current wrestlers of today.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that, this whole episode being the topic of merchandise, we could not do it without mentioning the Young Bucks. I mean, literally they got to a point where they were able to put on their own show, right? And
They had Bullet Club T-shirts in Hot Topic
yeah,
when the only stuff I was seeing outside, wrestling in stores was WWE stuff. Uh, it was that made sense because that was like really the only wrestling in town. But then when you started seeing this stuff, I was like, oh shit, this is cool. They're clearly doing something
yeah,
if they're going to be in these trendy stores.
yeah. So I mean, you got to think like that. They'd have to have made a deal with Hot Topic, figured that out, navigate those waters by themselves because they weren't with Tony Khan at that point. Yeah,
No,
those
AEW was not a thing then. No,
Yeah, AEW was not a thing at the time. In terms of percentage wise, again, you don't have to be specific, Peter, but again, just addressing what some of our viewers have been asking over the past few weeks, money wise in pro wrestling. So, what is the typical price point, if at all you know? Like, say someone does sell a t-shirt, they sell it for 29.99 in AEW. What type of profit share is that wrestler gonna get for
I
that?
honestly, I honestly don't know, and I think it varies contract per contract. I don't remember how much I make
Mhm.
from mine either. It's in my contract, but I do not remember it. But it adds up. You sell enough stuff, it adds up,
Yeah.
and it's not enough to like scoff at. It's just like it adds up. Depends on how much you're selling,
Yeah. It's like
and then I mean, guys are going to also be able to negotiate that rate too if they're selling a lot of stuff.
yeah. It's kind of like royalties then, in a sense.
It is royalties, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
in a
your
sense, yeah.
royalties. Does that exist now in pro wrestling? So if an AEW match plays with Peter Avalon from 4 years ago, are you getting a cut of that from anywhere, or that's still not a thing? Okay.
No, I don't think that's. I, I don't know where that falls in for anything. I don't know if anybody's making money like that
Okay.
with like residuals like that,
Yeah, because I know
unless
just
it would be the company, if
yeah.
people are purchasing old stuff.
I think Jesse Ventura was trying to make a plight for that back in the 80s and 90s, who coincidentally I heard has signed a deal and he's going to be back on Saturday night's main event. How about
Yeah,
that?
he was trying to make the brother brother an actual brother brotherhood, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
People weren't in.
Yeah, no, they definitely weren't in. What do you think about Jesse coming back? Were you a fan of his back in the
Yeah,
day?
he's awesome. He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you've got
in real life and in kayfabe. I think he's awesome.
yeah.
Mhm.
Switching gears again. Now, what do you think about Tony Schiavone? Because he was another great. He worked with Jesse in WCW. How's he? If you had,
Tony's awesome. I love Tony. He's funny. He's very
yeah,
funny.
Yeah, another
Yeah,
great commentator. Is Jim
yeah,
back? Is Jim back with you guys yet, or is he still out?
JR.
Jim Ross, yeah.
I haven't seen him. I think he does very sporadic appearances. Like I think he's mostly doing just pay-per-views.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause
Yeah,
I read something that he had some ill health plague him a while back.
yeah. I think
Um,
I think that's maybe what it. I think that's what it is. I'm not sure exactly, but
yeah,
it,
something.
yeah. Whenever he's able to join us, he's great.
Yeah, he's a fantastic commentator. Really, truly
What
is.
a legend. He's a legend.
Yeah,
My
and
God.
even Excalibur has impressed me because I remember when AEW first started, I thought, who is this guy, this masked commentator here?
Hmm.
But I actually been listening to him. He has one of those voices again that kind of captivated like a gorilla monsoon. Even Vince McMahon, I enjoyed Vince's commentary back in the day.
Yeah.
I did.
He's got a good voice, and his experience being a commentator with like throughout all of PWG for sure helped him because he
Mhm.
knows how to be serious. Now he knows how to be serious and still humorous when it needs to be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Coming back to merchandise a little bit more, Peter. So we've got a lot of wrestling stores now that have popped up all around the country, and
That's
that,
cool to me. I like the little niche shops.
yeah,
I got to do a autograph signing at one in I think it's Tucson. I think it's in Tucson. No, it's
yeah,
Phoenix, Arizona. In
yeah,
Arizona,
yeah,
that was a lot of fun. Yeah,
yeah. But that's helping wrestlers a lot too, though, because now they can make a whole day of it. They,
yeah. A lot of these stores will bring out wrestlers to do like autograph signings, and then so make some money that way. There's a lot.
yeah,
I think there's one in LA here that does a lot of that. The Wrestling Guy store or something. I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The wrestling guy store, yeah, that's another one. So many different avenues, so much money that has been generated and made in this business. It's absolutely incredible to think about it. But hey, it's only just begun because the resurgence of wrestling, I think it's safe to say, is here right now, Peter.
Yeah, it's happening for sure. There's two major companies that are competing for time and viewership, and that's awesome. That just makes both products better because they want to outdo each other.
Yeah.
Uh, what is what is those Nitro parties?
Oh
Watching
yeah.
Nitro and you switch back and forth between Raw and Nitro, like
Yeah.
that's great. That's
Yeah.
a lot of fun. So now it's like you can watch Raw and then watch Dynamite. Take your
Yeah.
pick.
Yeah. But I
Watch both at
definitely
the same time.
but I definitely think there's a huge distinction between the two now. Like we said
Mhm.
maybe a little bit earlier at the top of the show, WWE seems to be going back in that direction of the 90s now,
Mhm.
larger than life characters, whereas AEW is keeping that um more of that realism,
It's gritty. Yeah.
yeah, gritty, less of the colorful characters. So now you do see that difference. I think when AEW first dropped, there was there was some similarity between WWE and A, but now it's like it's splitting. It's going.
I love that it's distinct. I love it, and that's how wrestling for sure should be is distinct. WWE should have its own feel. AEW has its own gritty feel. Uh,
Yeah.
Wow, Women of Wrestling has this classic '80s throwback feel.
Yep.
And all these places should have their own feeling. It shouldn't be copycat clones of each other because that is how wrestling will grow.
Yeah.
Maybe the cartoonish world of WWE doesn't work. So they need to come and experience some grittiness that is AEW, and this is what I like. You know what I mean? I like this version of Batman as opposed to this version of Batman.
Right. It's the Christian Bale versus the Michael Keaton version of Batman. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to have that, I think, because then you can get that younger kid audience and you can get that more mature audience. And it definitely has. Like I said, I haven't I've been so busy producing this and other shows and working myself now on the
Mhm.
circuit that it's I don't find as much time as I would like to. Plus my wife doesn't particularly want to watch wrestling at the end of the day anyway.
You don't want to watch wrestling all day?
But she doesn't want to watch wrestling all day.
Yeah, yeah.
So as we talked about, it was depicted in that TV show Heels. Um, but I don't see it that much. I do try and see the highlights, and like I said, it is apparent that the two companies are more distinct now. But in your world, right, Peter? Again, if you were in charge of the companies, what would you lean more towards, the gritty or the cartoon?
Man. For me, it's the cartoon. When I when I you try to get a taste of all of it. You know,
Yeah.
that's why wrestling was fun. It was the variety show aspect of it. When I was writing and producing the Championship Wrestling from Arizona brand for United Wrestling Network, I wanted it to be very distinct from the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood brand.
Mhm.
So we went very uh, very campy with the show. You know, it was a regional show, so we
Mhm.
didn't have the biggest budget in the world. So we played around with what we could. We acknowledged that. He's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, you are clearly watching a regional wrestling product." So we really dived into the campiness of that with like over the top gimmicks, and everything was based just outside of the realm of reality with a lot of stuff, but everybody played it for real.
Yeah.
So I thought the show was awesome. At one point, it was uh, being thought of to be the flagship product because it was a lot of fun. It was one of the only brands at the time making actual money for
Mhm.
United Wrestling Network, and we sold out. The Nile Theater tons of times for our television tapings because people got to experience the zaniness. You
Yeah.
know, we had this character Robert Baines at the time who would drink this serum and become like super Hulk strength. And then we brought in the Rockness Monsters, Kevin Martinson and Yuma, and they were at the time their version of them were space police officers.
Okay.
Yeah, so we brought them in as space police to
Yeah.
investigate Robert Baines because the juice that he had was intergalactic and they were
Yeah.
called asteroids. And
Yeah.
from the Conseco Nebula.
Yeah.
So he was being investigated for the distributing illegal intergalactic substances, and we led to this tag match, and the
Yeah.
fans loved it, man.
Yeah.
The fans bought into the silliness of everything we did.
Yeah.
We had a gavel on a pole match
Okay.
where I lost control of the show to
Yeah.
one of the goofiest characters on the show. And then for like a month, we rebranded the show
Yeah.
for this character who was a mama's boy. So
Okay.
it became the Ryan Morals Championship Wrestling Hour for Good Boys. And this is how it was broadcasted on television for like a
Yeah.
month until I got control of the show back. So we really dived
Yeah.
into silliness, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tried to bring some of that to Derby City Wrestling, uh, which was a lot of fun to do. But we put that back into the realm of reality. I lost $10,000 to Kurt Hawkins in a
Okay.
match of my own money because I wasn't ready. Lost the match, asked to restart the match, but I'll put $10,000 of my own money. Lost the money, and then the check bounced. So like we were starting to do stuff like this before
Yeah.
we had to kind of pause the broadcast. So
Yeah.
I love diving into the cartoony and silliness of it.
Yeah.
It's like The Mask, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
The Mask, the movie was very silly and it's funny and Jim Carrey, but like the real Mask, the comic book is dark
Yeah.
and brooding and nasty.
Yeah.
So you can just have it all. You
Yeah.
can just have it all in your
Yeah.
broadcast, you know.
Yeah. No, I'm all for it. As you're telling me that, that's what I would tune in for, right? I mean, I just think that the more you can texturize, that's a good word, texturize a character and a story,
Yeah.
and if you can imagine them as an action figure and go back in your child mind and think, wow, would I pick that up? I think then you've got something that's and
Yeah.
I think we are moving into a time when that would definitely be well received with all the creativity we've got. I mean, look at like you mentioned the Marvel comic book world, right? That sells, but they are characters. They are
Mhm.
out of this world, silly stories, but that literally take people away from their day-to-day lives. Some of them are happy with their lives, but they still want to, go into a fantasy. Some are miserable in their lives. So for them, it's an escape. It's something
Mhm.
that doesn't look like what regular life looks like.
Yeah, it's just fantasy. I think, before he passed, Bray Wyatt's whole thing was amazing because it's like its own universe within the WWE universe or
Yeah,
whatever vernacular they're using now, you know?
yeah,
So, and it was very, very outlandish and cartoony, but it was fun, man. It was
yeah,
because then it was great, gritty and brooding at the same time, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Not everything hit, I thought, as well as it should, but
Mm.
tons of stuff hit better than it might have, you know? It was incredible. It was an incredible fantasy.
Yeah, it was an incredible fantasy and experiment at the time. I do remember that match he had with John Cena, one of those cinematic matches where John was part of the NWO. I think they did an angle there where he came out in the NWO shirt and Bray was against him. I think it was a WrestleMania. I think
Not
it was
sure.
during the
I
pandemic.
the one I think of it, I think I don't remember which WrestleMania, but it was him and Orton and like the worms that appeared
Oh yeah.
on the ring and everything. So they were always trying unique things with
Yeah.
him.
Do you remember that? Do you remember the Warrior and Jake the Snake? Do you remember that whole angle back in the
Hmm.
90s when he
Hmm.
took him in the snake room and locked him in there? Man, I mean, but like I said, for me,
Yeah.
you can't touch that. That
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 absurdity is
yeah,
fun, man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I miss a lot of that stuff. For sure. The just absurdity of it, man. It's so
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it is. It's so fun. And like again, going back to the merchandise, it's what kicked all this off. Because wrestling was, if you look at 1984, Hogan and Iron Sheik, that's what it was. It was dark arenas, this guy against good guy, bad guy, but there wasn't much of that, like when the Dungeon of Doom came in, and then the Mega Powers, and it hadn't hit that point yet. Once
Mhm.
that point hit, you saw the whole world open up to pro wrestling. So
Yeah.
I think I discussed this with Paul a few weeks ago, maybe on the show or off camera, but we said, I think sometimes people think the wheel is broken, so let's fix it.
Hmm.
I don't think it's ever been. I mean, do you? I don't think it's ever been broken, Peter, for that kind of wrestling. I don't think it's ever been broken. I just think, like you said, to the degree in which it's done, you
Yeah.
can still have it in a
Yeah.
company.
It shouldn't be your whole show.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, but like, why can't it have it?
Yeah.
Wrestling is fantasy in itself. So like, it has a realm that you can play with. I can why can't the show have a gritty, brutal realism match over here? But then why can't it have the complete opposite on the same show? And I think it absolutely can. It's
Yeah.
just how you tell the story.
Yeah. Undertaker versus Undertaker, SummerSlam 94. I mean that,
Yeah.
but then you had I think it was Lex Luger and Tatanka where Ted DiBiase was buying him. He was saying Lex Luger sold out, but then Tatanka did. So that
Hmm.
was more of a real like, oh, he sold out for money. Whereas the Undertaker lives in this fantasy realm where he's a dead man and there's two
Yeah.
versions of it. So again, that's what you're saying. You got gritty here, real life, fantasy up here in the main event. It worked
You
fine.
just have to have the guys just have to commit 100% to what they're playing, man.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes or breaks it too, you know, is you have to have the guy if it's a gag, you can't let the fans in on the gag
Right.
completely like that. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, they know something might be silly, but
Yeah.
you have to be playing it like it's the most serious thing in the
Yeah.
world, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whatever is happening,
Yeah.
so that the fans will buy into it. That's how we buy into so much when we consume so much media. And it's like stuff is just like, okay, that's completely bullshit, but I love it because they're playing it 100%, you know?
Yeah. They believe in it. Like I said, and
Yeah.
you're the master at that. You've mastered every character that you portrayed. You took
Thanks.
it to the hilt, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
You have to buy it. You have
Yeah.
to buy it.
I will always sing Peter's praises on whenever he comes on this channel. It's just the thing. Like I said, I mean, to me in the modern era, I'm just gonna give you the props again. When they give you that gimmick in AEW to kick it all off, you you perfectly encapsulated that and you made it your own, and we believed it, and you were entertaining to watch. In my opinion, one of the greatest reasons to tune into AEW when it first kicked off was the
Thanks.
librarian. Seriously,
It was fun. Yeah.
it
I'd say
was
it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
it
Thank
was
you.
it was a lot of fun. Um, but Peter, we're gonna bring this one to a close today. I think we covered a lot of topics, and but I want to thank you for coming on. Stay on the line before we say goodbye to the audience. Again, everybody. I apologize for Paul's lack of his absence today. He was filming the new Vince McMahon documentary, which I'm sure next week we'll get to tell you guys all about. But until then, everybody, thank Pretty Peter Avalon for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
You, Peter. And make sure you powerplex that subscribe button, hit the likes, and share this with your friends and family. But until next time, everybody, keep reaching, keep trying to discover the power of truth.